Welcome to the I Choose Health podcast. I'm your host, Stephen Leslie. Today we have friend of the show, fitness coach, mental health advocate, and podcaster Marc Paisant joining the show. Is something interfering with your happiness or preventing you from achieving your goals? There is definitely something keeping me from my happiness and accomplishing my goals. I need to take stock of my depression and consistent negative self-talk. Therapy helped me realize that I was deserving of happiness. That's why this podcast is called I Choose Health. It was about me choosing happiness, and I wanted to share that with you. That's why I wanted to and have partnered with BetterHelp as a sponsor to share the gift of therapy with you. Over 4 million people have used BetterHelp to start living a healthier, happier life. People spend hours in the gym every week. So why not give your mind the same kind of attention? Starting therapy can be hard. The right therapist for you may not be in your area, and some people find the face-to-face interaction of therapy uncomfortable. With BetterHelp, you can have your therapy sessions as a phone call, as a video chat, or even via messaging if you prefer that. Whatever is the most comfortable version of therapy for you. BetterHelp can match you to one of over 30,000 therapists in their network, which gives you access to a wider range of expertise that may be available in your area. To get started, you fill out a questionnaire to help assess your specific needs, and then you'll get matched with your therapist, in most cases within 48 hours or less. You'll be able to schedule therapy sessions at a time that's convenient for you. If the therapist you're first matched with doesn't feel like the right fit, which can be common when starting therapy, you can easily switch to a new therapist at no additional cost without stressing about insurance, who's in your network, or anything like that. If you think you might benefit from therapy, consider BetterHelp. Click the link in the description or visit betterhelp.com/iChooseHealth for 10% off your first month with a licensed therapist. What is up, guys and gals? Welcome back to the I Choose Health podcast. Thank you again for tuning in with us. We're so glad that you're back, and I know that you've really been enjoying those series that we've had, especially the ones where we were dealing with like vegan bodybuilding and different vegan thoughts on nutrition and how it affects overall health. And I'm just really thankful. I just want to shout out Justin Strickland, Fueled by Plants, Robert Cheek, and Corin Sutton. They just came on, and they were just like amazing guests on the show. And if you guys have a chance, definitely check out Robert's books. He's the author of The Plant-Based Athlete, and he has some other books on vegan bodybuilding, and he has The Impactful Vegan coming out in June of this year. So that's a really good one to look at as well. And then Corin's books as well. Especially Macro Mastery, where he, goes into looking at macros if you're looking to go vegan bodybuilding. And he does have a cookbook coming out pretty soon. But we're going to get right back into it. We are with, I would say, a friend of the show, right? He's actually was our second guest on the podcast when we started back in November. And his contributions then were really amazing. His insights then were really amazing. I really appreciated it. And what he said there concerning mental health, just normalizing it, we usually try to make mental health out to be this negative thing. And he made it very clear that just saying, hey, I feel good today, it's a mental health conversation. And just how I feel about this thing, whether it's positive or negative, is a mental health conversation. So we've brought back, personal trainer, mental health advocate, and podcaster Marc Paisant back to the show. How are you doing today, Marc?
Stephen, I'm doing great. Thank you for having me back on. I really appreciate these conversations and looking forward to it as always.
Yeah, definitely. And, I spoke with Marc, prior to the show. We wanted to get into the episode by looking at a couple of trending topics or news articles concerning mental health that's out there right now. And we really want to start the discussion and allow you guys to also be a part of the discussion. And so I was looking at this article written by Claretta Bellamy in NBC News. And the article says that exposure to police violence linked to poor sleep in Black adults, studies find. And this is police violence, okay? And this is something that we're very clear on. We experience as a nation, going from George Floyd to Michael Brown, you name it. We've experienced it time and time again. Going as far back as Rodney King, like we've had all those experiences. And the article starts by saying that Black adults who are exposed to news of police killings of unarmed Black people are more likely to suffer from poor sleep in the months to come than white adults, according to a study published Monday in the journal JAMA Internal Medicine. And just to highlight one more thing from the article, go down a little bit. It says the researchers then looked at what happened to sleep after 331 police-involved killings of unarmed Black people. They found that Black people's sleep worsened in the 6 months that followed police killings, while white people had no change in their sleep. And I don't know. Again, I'm originally from Barbados, and we're a predominantly Black society. So the issues that we saw or see are not the same that America sees, where even though America is not a predominantly white society, but there is a predominant white structure that controls the narrative over a lot of the things that goes on in America. And, I wasn't really concerned significantly a lot with race. It wasn't something that I thought about until I moved to America, then started to see how the power structure that is really had a significant impact, not just on me, but my friends, family. And so this is just really an interesting article where it's just highlighting that. And this is police brutality, this is police violence, right? And it's definitely a very tough situation for many people to deal with. But I wanted to also consider the fact that there's a lot of other difficult situations that Black people have to face on a day-to-day basis. And Mark, I don't know what you think about this article and what impact it has on you as you're reading it.
The first thing I thought about, and I sent this to you, was Dr. Angela Holliday Bell, and she was on the 6 a.m. show. And off the bat, regardless of what the purpose of this is or what the reasoning is that there's already a difference in the amount of quality sleep based on race. And she brings that up. And it's just because the stressors that people have in their lives, the triggers that they have in their lives, and the stressors that they don't bring on themselves. And the part of this article that hit me the hard, well, it didn't hit me the hardest, but I think the thing I took the most from it was, she says, it's okay to feel this way because you're responding to a very real, very harmful things. So I think anybody can take from that, hey, don't just push your stress to the side. Don't just say I shouldn't feel this way. Don't invalidate, because she also says that self-validation is a tool, and it should be used. It's the phone that's ringing nonstop. You talked about George Floyd's death. We could talk about Ahmaud Arbery. We can talk about pretty much, we can run through a bunch of names. And the hardest part of this is that you know it's real. Like, I know it's real. My circle of friends knows it's real, but a lot of people don't believe that. And that's what makes this really tough. Because I'm not going to say it'd be easy, but it'd be easier if you were to just give that kind of opening statement that you did, and then everyone on the other line was like, oh yeah, I can see that. That's understandable. But you're going to get probably more than half the people say, oh, I don't believe that one bit. Like, I don't believe it one bit. It's, you guys bring this on yourselves. You're just trying to make stuff up. Why does everything have to be about race? And like I tell people all the time, like, I didn't make this about race. I never made this about race. I'm just spitting out the facts, spitting out truths. And if someone wants to call me out and say, no, Mark, that's absolutely false, this is why, fact, data, then I will have that conversation. But if it's like, oh, that's false because of I've seen this, or I feel this, or this one thing happened to me once, and it's like, those are the conversations that bug me. But this is an absolutely real thing, and I think as a Black man, it's just I've laid up late at night thinking. I've had these thoughts where it's like, what if I leave the house sometime tomorrow and it's the last time my kids see me? I have nothing in my truck. I don't do drugs. I don't do anything illegal. I don't do any of those things. But guess what? I fit the description. I fit it. So it is absolutely real. And I think this is something that we all need to educate ourselves on.
And I think the amazing part about the last part that I read there was that, and this is obviously not to villainize or vilify, white individuals, but it said that while white people had no change in their sleep,
Mm-hmm.
and it almost feels so familiar, that statement, because when you have white counterparts and friends, when you try to highlight some of the issues that you experience as a Black individual or Black man living in this country, it almost feels like, oh, here we go again, right? Or it's not really that significant. It's not really that important. It's not going to affect somebody like you, right? And even that statement is a problem in itself, right? But it's just like, I don't think that they see beyond police killings where we're experiencing, just because of our history in this country, we experience that mental.
It's fatigue. It's mental fatigue. That's exactly what it is.
Right? It's like consistently, like a consistent mental exhaustion, right? Because it's like you have to consistently think of, and I don't want to say that poverty is a race thing, right? But it's just like you're dealing with poverty and you're trying to figure out your next step, your next move, while your white counterpart, while they do experience poverty as well, they're probably percentage wise are not experiencing it at the same level, and probably have a system and family around them that could help. And a lot of times I've listened to many individuals, Black individuals who said, look, man, I had to pull myself out of that situation. And then there are a lot of some people just never make it out of that situation. So it's really imperative that we feel, if we want to really help make a change, that we really feel connected to what's going on. And just because we're not Black or white or whatever, like we need to feel connected to the things that are affecting others in society. And so, I just found that so pivotal. And like, I I was like recently, like, just trying to make some transitions in my job. And, I was just asking some people like, hey, when you put it on your application, do you fill out the race component or the race part of the job application? And oftentimes my white counterparts would say, I don't really think about it. Right? Just fill it out. And I reached out to one Black friend of mine and he's like, man, I put Black, he's like, I put two or more races, right? I put two or more races, or I just put white. He said, I put white sometimes. Like he said he did it one time and he got a call back. And then when he went to the company, they started acting a little weird because they were expecting him to be a white individual. And he just knew that they were going to he just wanted to see how they were going to react. But it's just crazy that, like, even as far as filling out a job application, I have to think, well, should I put my race? Like, or why is this here? Why is this even here? So now it's just like something that's even more mentally exhausting. Like, oh wait, I just put in all of my qualifications, reasons why I'm qualified for this job, and now I got to think, my race is going to be a one jot against me or one thing against me that's going to keep me from getting the job that I want.
One thing that I heard over and over in that, what you just talked about, was empathy or the lack thereof. That's usually, that's what I talk a lot about, and it's one of those things. Like, I had to look it up, but the remora fish is a fish that people don't know what it is, but once I tell you what it is, you'll understand. Like, it's the shark sucker fish, or the sucker fish that swims next to the sharks. And so if you put that fish in the ocean, and then you put, just any other, maybe a smaller shark, who's going to be more afraid of the sucker fish? They don't stress about sharks. They actually just attach to them. They swim next to them. And then you have smaller sharks who are afraid of the sharks. They are high stress level about that. So that's what it kind of feels like sometimes. It kind of feels like, yeah, everybody is in this water, but only a certain set of people are afraid of the sharks. And other people don't even care. They sometimes don't even notice that they're there. And when you talk about like the certain group of people, in this case, white people, being unaffected, their sleep is unaffected by this, it either means that one of two things, and I hope it's not one of them, but I know it is. One of two things. One, they literally don't see it. They don't care. It's like, I don't even notice that is happening. Or they do see it, but they're not empathetic towards it. They don't really, yeah, I see it, but it doesn't affect me. So I'm going to sleep like a baby. And so it's just one of those things where when people use that term that has been buzzword, been coined, that term ally and allyship, that is a word that is a verb. That's it. You have to be an ally to be an ally. Like, you can't just say, hey, I'm an ally. I got my Black Lives Matter flag. It's like, you see, black, like, no, it's more than that. It's more than that. So, yeah, I definitely understand. I say I understand. I do understand, but I'm not in agreement with people just being like, oh, it happens. But that's not on me.
And I'm glad you said that because, we're two black men here discussing this issue. And I had to also check my privilege as a black man and start to realize, like, okay, if I'm going to try to, stand up for issues concerning race, then I have to obviously stand up for issues concerning women. And so, as personal trainers, we know that oftentimes that when it comes to programming for women, as trainers, a lot of times the programming is not specific enough, right? It's not catered towards maybe what they're going through. So as men, we don't see that time of the month, right? We don't have to worry about, varying changes in hormones, or being pregnant, right? Like, these are things that we don't have to worry about. So we can trade however we want on any given day, right? Whereas now, when it comes to women and, training them, and it comes to their nutrition and all these things we have to take in consideration. And so, I said, well, since we have this podcast, this platform, I said, I want to get as many women, especially in that area, to really help women who need these answers. And there's like consistent surveys showing how like the attention to women's health keeps getting worse and worse every year, right? And there needs to be a more specific, like, centering in on women's health, because the way that something impacts men is going to impact women differently. And so we really need to highlight that. I will say I have been trying to get a lot of, women experts on the show, and some of them obviously very busy. And then others, like you may not get a response back, or there'll be like a short verbal commitment and then there's like no follow up. But to those so far, obviously, and there's obviously no knock on those who haven't been able to do it as yet. But to those who've been on the podcast so far, given their experience and their expertise concerning women's health. I'm definitely appreciative of you, and we'll definitely have some of them back to give further insights. But this first article is just like, this is something that I think we knew, but it was just to like put us the stats together and the language together, just brought it all together. And so I'm glad that this is here, so that we can really think about it and discuss it.
Mm-hmm.
So the next thing I want to get to, I want to look at this Olympic athlete, Olympic figure skater Gracie Gold, and she talked about the pressure she felt to minimize her mental health struggles, and she said it wasn't palatable. And so she took a break from competing in 2017 to seek treatment for what were announced as an eating disorder and anxiety. In reality, she was dealing with suicidal thoughts. All right. And this is written by Catherine Aito, also NBC News. And for those of you listening, I'm definitely going to post the links in the description. But again, Gracie Gold, she was dealing with her issues, her mental health issues, and she had to delay. And she said she was dealing with suicidal thoughts. And more than anything, like that definitely trumps anything else. Like if that's what she's feeling, like if existentially she's at a point where she feels like she doesn't want to be here anymore, or thinks that she needs to remove herself, to self-transition, like at that point, like we really got to start evaluating everything in the grand scheme of things and start to ask, like, what is really important, right? Like the entertainment, seeing her out there figure skating, and this definitely means a lot to her. I'm pretty sure she's probably been figure skating her entire life and making it to the Olympics, right? Like, she's probably has pressure on her even with the last name Gold, but so, but it's just like, just to see her be open about that is really important, and I just want to get your thoughts on her situation as well.
And this is one of those things where you ask the exact right question: what is important? And that answer is not the same for everyone. But one thing that I believe we all say is important is self-preservation. I think we all think that's important. And some people may put, the preservation of their family or their loved ones over themselves, or, vice versa, whatever it is. But self-preservation is usually, that's why we have fight, freeze, or flight built into our DNA. That's why we eat when we're hungry, we drink when we're thirsty, things like that. And if, people not in that space of sports, and you and I know a lot about it because we are in that space of train. I'm training a few high school students right now in soccer who are going to go on to play in college. And I tell everyone the same thing. I usually tell their parents this. I said, I don't train skill. I train confidence. It's a big difference. Big difference. Your kid can go out and any trainer can teach them how to do this, how to do that. And, but the thing about young athletes, and I need to find this number, but it's a big number. The amount of athletes quitting team sports before the age of 16 is higher than it's ever been. And the main two factors of that, and everybody knows the first one, the pressure. Like that's the first one. That's the big one. That's the pressure. And the second one is kids are specializing in one sport earlier than they've ever done it before. I mean, I'm 44 years old. When I was playing and I was younger, everybody played 2 or 3 sports. Some people played 4. Like you always had a season of something. You always had a season of something. I remember I played 2 sports until, I was almost in college. And now I even play athletically, amateur. I play 3 different sports depending on what season is, because I just want to go out and have fun. But skating, let's think about this for a second. Skating is one of those sports, and my neighbor, his daughter does it. You specialize very early, very quickly. There's no seasons. It's all year long. And how often are kids validated for doing something great, but then admonished for doing it wrong constantly? Now think about that throughout your entire teenage years to your 20s, and we're talking about Olympic athletes who constantly aren't giving the feedback that today was just an off day. Now I'm hearing it more and more. Like I heard somebody say something great about I think it was a female softball player. I need to find this, but she went out and did some work with her coach, and it was actually a track star. I apologize, track star. Did some work with her coach. They weren't feeling it. They weren't feeling it. He didn't admonish her. He didn't do anything. He said, good job. And she was kind of thrown off by it, which you and I probably would be too if we were like, oh, he said, listen, this is like, you can't expect perfection or greatness all the time. And I don't think I was ever told that as a kid growing up. I don't think I was ever, like, we were told one of the greatest lines in the history of all sports, remember the Titans, is, expect perfection all the time. Like, I expect you to be perfect. So I don't know about you, but I'm hearing a lot about these power lifters and gym rats who have been dying at early ages lately. And it's been pretty scary. And the amount of stress that they're putting on their bodies, the amount of just absolute mental anguish that has been putting to look a certain way, to be a certain way. And at what point is it enough? You can't answer that question. I can't. We can't answer that question. But what point is it enough? Is it before I go to college? When I'm in the Olympics? When I've won the gold medal? When I'm in the finals? When is it enough? And when is the right time? So this is something that hits close to home, because anybody who's in the youth sports space needs to understand that we have to have these conversations, and we have to let kids know that it's okay to not feel 100%, to not get, like, it's okay to have those days. It makes all the good days feel that much better.
Mm-hmm. Now, I want to comment on something that she says in the article. She says, it wasn't palatable is a word that they use for the world, and specifically the skating community. This is what Gold told to Savannah Guthrie. And she said, we don't talk about those things out loud, but for me, it wasn't gossip or hearsay. It was my story. I was in the middle of Arizona in rehab in the middle of a season, and I felt like an honest answer was appropriate. And I'm glad that she's also, able to express what she was going through. And I definitely think as a nation, we should be supportive of her in that decision. But I want to add, I'm very curious what this is an article that's relatively new in terms of, us hearing about this. And I just want to know what the response is going to be to her versus what it was to Simone Biles.
I knew you were going there. I knew you were going there. I knew you were going there. It's all, yeah.
Right. Because it's like, again, like there's this idea and this expectation that, especially for Simone Biles, like, she worked extremely hard to get to where she's at. And I feel to some extent the structures that feel like they allowed her to be there. Right? And it's like, if we allowed you to be there, how dare you say you're going to take some mental health break? Right? Now, let alone the competing at Olympic level being hard. When you are a Black individual, a Black woman in a sport that is not typically dominated by Black women, it is a severe amount of pressure. It is probably like, what's the word? I'm blanking on the word. But it's probably definitely like a lot of, what's the word when you think that you don't belong, and like, well, what's the term? when you I don't know why I'm blanking on this right now.
That you don't belong
Yeah, it's like
in
you
the
feel
same
like
category.
yeah, it's like you're like, you know what, like you've done the work, you've got here, and then you still feel like, oh, imposter syndrome. Here we go,
Yeah, there you go.
imposter syndrome. So it's just like I could imagine that Simone Biles' level of imposter syndrome was probably pretty high, even though she's worked as hard as she did to get to the Olympics and to dominate it the way that she did. And I'm just curious that with that contrast of how Simone Biles was dealt with, I'm curious as to how Gracie Gold is going to be responded to, as a white woman now airing this, even though this is something that happened 6 years ago. She's now making it very clear to many of us. I'm just curious as to what the response is going to be.
I mean, you know what I mean. You know what the response is going to be. I mean, we joke about it because it's becoming that way, and it's nothing. I don't want to compare Gracie to Simone at all. They're both Olympic athletes, and they both should be very happy. But let's think about this for a second. Simone Biles is the most decorated gymnast I know American. I don't know if it's Olympic history or American. I think it's American history, whatever it is. Like, she's the most goals, all that good stuff. She's the Michael Phelps of women's gymnastics, basically. Gracie Gold has won one bronze medal, I believe. Now, again, this is not a knock on Gracie. Like, I don't have a bronze. You have a bronze. I don't have a bronze. Like, it's not a knock on her. But think about what we're allowing one person to do and not allowing the other to do, and they're on different echelons. They're on different. It's like if Michael Jordan came out and said something about mental health versus like my next door neighbor who is an accountant or something like that, and it's like which one will we allow to say it? Now, there is a component to this that is kind of on us, and I'll explain. There is this this vision that we have, this picture we have at least in North America, of Black women being strongest person, like a black, like we understand the strong Black woman. It's very hard for us to think about a Black woman being vulnerable. Like, when I think about strong, like I think about my mother, God rest her soul, or my grandmother, or my sister, the Black woman, the strong Black woman I know in my life. It's like their persona is supposed to be strong. That's what they've had to be. Like, no one put that. They had to be that. They had no choice. And so when one who is very decorated, very visual, very out in the open comes out and says those things, it's kind of a shock to a lot of us. But in Gracie's case, I love the fact that she's doing this, because how many young women are seeing this, or reading this, or being like, wait a second. Okay. She said the quiet part out loud, where I'm not supposed to say these things. And here's the thing about you talking about being kind of using your privilege and understanding it, male versus female. She goes on to say that she was sexually assaulted or raped at the age of 21. And that should be enough. That's stop right there. Stop. Let's talk about this. Like, full stop. Let's talk about it. But then, like, we're going to have some people that, of course, won't believe her, thinks that, she should get through it or past it. It's so I think we should start taking people at face value and at least listening to what they have to say.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, as you said correctly, like, I think that's a problem with our society, is that we don't listen enough, right? We listen to what we think we heard, and then we respond, right? As for me, sometimes I'll ask a person, and maybe it might get annoying, but I'll say I just really want to get and understand what you're saying so that I'm processing it correctly, and I don't want to go away with my preconceptions on what I think you're saying, right? And so, if we would just listen to each other a little bit more, uh, I think our world would be a little bit more cohesive, and we would have less of the issues that we have right now.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, I agree wholeheartedly, 1,000%.
So, Gracie, go, prayers up, and keep your head up. You're doing something great. So don't feel like you need to keep hiding it or hiding your issues. It takes a lot. When I tell you, it takes a lot to even mention that you're suicidal. Like in 2024, like with all the things that are out there in 2024, and so saying that you're suicidal is still something that's hard to say, right? Because I've heard like I remember saying something to someone about some individual being suicidal, and the person's response was like, "Oh, God don't like that," right? And yeah, and so I was just like, "Oh man, like, can we just stop a moment and actually really think about this person and see like, how can I help this person?" You know what I'm saying? So yeah, it's like for her to really have the boldness to say it, and I'll say it here, and I think I told you in our last discussion, I've struggled with that for a long time, right? And coming forward and saying that is tough. It's really tough, and I'm not at any I'm not at the level that she's at in terms of how often she's in front of the public. But that's extremely hard. So I give it up to her. You know, shout out to her for really doing that. So I want to go to the next article, and my links just became unlinkable. Here we go. All right. So it says that Silicon Valley. This is really interesting. I'm surprised this is. I don't know if I'm surprised that this is in Silicon Valley, but it says Silicon Valley County becomes the first in the U.S. to declare loneliness a public health emergency. All right. It says a mountain of research has linked loneliness to an increased risk of dementia, depression, anxiety, heart disease, stroke, and early death. They said loneliness is officially a health emergency in California's San Mateo County, which is located in the San Francisco Bay Area and includes part of Silicon Valley. The county's board of supervisors passed a resolution on Tuesday that declared loneliness a public health crisis and pledged to explore measures that promote social connection in the community. Now, I don't know about you guys, but loneliness is a real mental health issue. It really is. It really is. And I've seen it affect many people that I know, many people in my family, where they're alone for a significant amount of time and how it's led to, and they just said it, like dementia. Like I've seen members of my family go through that as well because of a lot of it is linked to the loneliness. I don't know, Mark, what your experience has been with this article here as well.
So, a couple things here. One, we have to understand that our people are living longer. There's only one group of people whose average life expectancy has gone down, and that's white men. And that's a different show about different health concerns. But everybody else, their life expectancy is going up. So that means we have more grandparents, we have more great grandparents, and we have more people who are living in houses as widows and living in houses without any kids in them. One of the things that keeps us sharp as we get older is the amount of interaction we have, the amount of synapses we have in our brain, the amount of critical thinking we have to do, the amount of things we have to do that aren't mundane, that is just not sitting in our own thoughts. Now, is there a time and a place for us to sit in our own thoughts and meditate, be mindful? Yes, there is. I think that's a great thing to do day to day. But when that becomes your life and you start to sit there in loneliness and sit there by yourself and no one comes to visit, there's nobody to bounce ideas off, to stay active, to stay mentally focused, to do all those things. We start to just sit down and become couch potatoes, and we eat poorly, and things start snowballing. And then, what do we hear? We hear, well, no one ever comes visit me, and I have nothing to do, and why don't the kids ever? And so it's one of those things where a generation in our family, 2 generations maybe, were outliving their life. We have the oldest generation possibly not really living their life. But this is kind of twofold to me, because I think, I talk to my dad as much as I can. I talk to my dad every few days. There's sometimes we talk daily sometimes. And he has a good group of friends around him. He does live alone, but great group of friends. And the thing I tell him all the time, and he does it, is to stay active physically, whether that's little weights, resistance, whether that's the bike, whether that's walking. And he does. He's in great shape. And he's one of the things that they talked about, I believe, in this, of course, is the increased risk of heart disease and stroke. So we're talking about physical ailments from loneliness. So I think our generation, my generation, maybe a little older, we have to understand that there's a possibility that we're going to have more time on our own as we get older. So, not saying that we need to put all of this on ourselves, but at a certain point, we need to understand that we have to do what we can to keep our minds, racing. Take up a hobby. Once both my parents had retired, they started traveling together. And I know this is not everybody can do that, but there's get out of the house, sunshine. The best form of just mental cleansing can come from just 15 minutes out in the sun. So I think this might be one of those things where it's so easy to just sit on your couch and flip through the Hulus and the Netflix and the Primes, everything. You can watch TV for 24 hours straight and still find something else to watch. And we have to understand that we have to continue to make friends. We have to continue to tell the people in our lives how much they mean to us. And if you have a parent or a grandparent that lives alone, we need to do our part in making sure that we stay up with them and stay in contact with them and make sure we're staying in their lives.
Yeah, I'm going to put myself on a chopping block because hopefully my family's okay with this. So my father, as you mentioned, your dad is dealing with prostate cancer and dementia. So he has a double whammy. Sometimes I get so caught up with work, with my child, my wife, family, right? Just normal everyday things that I don't always check in. And I know that, my dad is, is not married, still not, married to my mom. So it's just again, there's that loneliness factor that's there. And for me, when it comes to, I call this podcast, I Choose Health. If I'm going to choose health for myself personally, I have to choose it for my family as well. So I'm putting myself on a chopping block that I got to do better. Reach out more, and not just reach out and hey, how you doing? That's it. Actually have planned time together. And that's just something that I have to do because I've noticed that I've been starting to question myself as a parent in light of my relationship with my father, right? And so it's just I wonder what type of parent I am and whether or not the time I'm giving to my child is significant enough or impactful enough. So, yeah, this article kind of really hit home, and really shout out to San Mateo County for declaring that as a, a medical emergency, and it's something that really doing something to really try to create more community and create a healthier situation.
Yeah, I mean, I listen. What you just said is tough for anybody to say, but all it takes is a text, a phone call, an email. Just hey, I got. I've started to do this thing where if I have 5 minutes free, I call people, I text people, and I let them know that hey, I had 5 minutes open up before this meeting. I just wanted to check on you. And I've seen great success with that because it makes people think, hey, Mark had a little bit extra time today and he thought about me. So that's just one thing I've started to do.
And it may seem insignificant, but like you have no idea like who that saved, right? Like
Mm.
like imagine that you're going through your day thinking nobody cares and you get a call, Mark calls and it's like, hey man, I was just thinking about you. And that may be just one thing that just impacts someone in a positive direction.
I got positive feedback the first time I did it. He texted me later that day and was like, you don't understand how much that meant to me. Thank you. So I was like, I had no idea. So that's why I continue to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. And, these are things that I, constantly deal with. I had an old classmate in my country from Barbados. Unfortunately, this February actually makes it 2 years since he, would have self-transitioned, suicide. So, prayers up for him and his family as well. But yeah. And seems like we're staying in this zone of, or this topic. The next article is dealing with suicide as well. And it says that there are rising Latino suicide rates, which worry community leaders. The Hispanic suicide rate has risen significantly in the last decade, and mental health experts cite factors like poverty, language barriers, and a lack of bilingual mental health professionals. Interesting. A group from teens to seniors gathered an in-office inside a grocery store where Spanish language food signs cater to the large Hispanic population in this northwestern Georgia city dominated by the carpet industry. The conversation, moderated by community leader America Grunner, focused on mental health and suicide. The Tuesday night meetings draw about a dozen people who sit on makeshift furniture and tell their often emotional stories. Gardner formed a support group in 2019 after 3 Latinos aged 17 to 22 died by suicide here over a 2-week period. This is really interesting. It really kind of comes back to this idea of community and inclusion. And when we feel like we're excluded, we feel like we're no longer necessary. A lot of times those feelings kind of pop up. And it's just interesting because I was actually doing some calls this week to book some fitness assessments. And I came across a couple, because the community that I'm training, there are a lot of, Hispanic individual, Latino, Latinx individuals within this community. And I would say maybe 4 or 5 of those calls, they only spoke Spanish. And I was just like, man, I really need to learn Spanish because then, these conversations would be a lot easier. But again, it kind of comes back to making sure that everyone in society is being seen and heard. And, when you move into a society American society, which is obviously going to be predominantly English speaking, we have to really think about the impact that it has on those who don't have the same access to that language.
So there's a couple things to this, and when I'm reading this, a lot of these numbers and this research was in Georgia, and that's where I live, and there's a bunch of factors here, and one is, am I supposed to be here? Am I included in here? It's tough to be somebody who is black or brown or looks different or trans or whatever, whatever LGBT, somebody that's not, it's everything is getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and the world is getting darker and darker and darker. And I don't personally see it that way because I have coping mechanisms that I've basically burned into my system over the last decade or so. But we always hear about community, and like that's the end all be all. We hear about, black on black crime or black violence, or see, why can't the black community come together and do something? We see, a Hispanic portrayed negatively, and see, this is why the Hispanic community needs to, Latin community needs to, and we always talk about, mostly the Asian community in a positive light. The sad part about all this is suicide is the 10th leading cause of death in America. Suicide is the first leading cause of death to Asians between the ages of 15 and 24. So we can stick to, this is about Latin Americans and about Hispanic people. I understand that. But it all comes down to, when does our community need to feel connected to other communities? When does do we just have this part of town, or are we part of the town? Like, it's, we work hard, we take care of our kids, but half the people in this country want to deport us. We give back to community. We get paychecks, which they take state and local taxes out of, but I'm told that I don't give back. I'm told that I don't pay my fair share. So it's like, when you hear these things constantly over and over, that's hard. But there is one thing I want to say about this, is that there are certain cultures where there's just things you don't do. And what I mean by that is, I spoke to somebody on one of my calls, after one of my calls actually, and she was talking about a male client she has, and he's Hispanic. The couple is Hispanic, and his wife, who is also Hispanic, would laugh at him anytime he was vulnerable, or cried, or talked about how he felt. And I don't care who you are. Like, I don't care what kind of person you're, like, if you're a man and like you've heard that you want to be sensitive and outgoing and make sure you put yourself out there, and the woman you chose to marry and love basically laughs at you and calls you less than a man when you show emotion. And and these are things that there's certain cultures that are trying to get past this. And I really feel for communities that feel so left out. Like, I just had Hispanic men and putting down flooring in my house, and a Hispanic woman that I know, who's an American citizen, being the project manager. But then when she leaves my house, half the people want her deported. And back to what you were saying about who we talk to and how we talk to them and how it feels knowing your privilege. Like, when you pick up the phone and you're calling about an issue, an opportunity, a customer or whatever, and it's a Spanish speaker, and you're like, oh, thank God I can explain myself. Or you're a woman and you hear a female voice, like, oh, thank you, I don't want to be mansplained. Like, those things, like, some people just don't get it. And that's why we need more diversity in every aspects of business, customer service, mental health, resources. We need Hispanic men talking to Hispanic men. We need young Asian people talking to young Asian people. We need black men talking to black men. Because we might not exactly walk the same walk or have the same route that we go down, but we understand that path. We understand it, and we can talk the talk, and we can speak the language, and we can empathize in a way others can't. Now, I'm not saying, a white woman can't help a Hispanic man, or a black man can help a white. Well, I'm not saying that at all. However, when you get on that phone and like you're frustrated and no one's listening to you, and you have to go through your child to interpret what you're trying to say to this person, I can't even imagine that frustration.
Yeah. Look, man, I was saying to my wife just this week that sometimes I go to certain places and if I see a low quota of black people, I immediately start not feeling comfortable, right? And look, I live in Brooklyn, New York, and I used to live in Brownsville, all right? And Brownsville is one of those areas in New York that, there's a lot of, I'm going to say there's a lot of activity going on in Brownsville, okay? So, and, I then moved to Midwood, which was a little quieter, right? Less activity. And, but I felt, and there were less people in Midwood that looked like me, even though the numbers weren't too bad. But there were moments where I felt safer in Brownsville than I did in certain areas because maybe it's not even that the guy who's white is racist. Maybe he just doesn't get me, right? Maybe he doesn't understand me, my culture, my upbringing. Like I've heard people say that sometimes white people say to them, "Hey, man, why do you guys talk so aggressively?" Right? And he's like, "No, man, we're not angry or upset or anything. That's just how we express ourselves." Right? And so there's just like this significant gap in understanding, a significant gap in also taking the time to get to know people. And I know for some people, because of what the media puts out there, that sometimes they don't want to approach a person who's black because maybe that black man or woman fits the stereotype of what the media is talking about. And I'm not willing to chance it. Right? But we gotta connect. And sometimes I like to find a guy who seems a little misunderstood, seems like he maybe has too many tattoos or too many piercings or whatever it is. I'm like, hey, what's up, man? I just strike up a conversation, right? Just connect. And I think, and I don't want to make a claim to have the answers to life's problems, but maybe if we try to connect a little bit more, we might actually be able to help the world heal a little bit better.
I'm gonna tell you right now, if you're an adult and you don't have a tattoo, I'm suspect of you. Like I feel better with people who are tatted up than people who aren't. That's just
hold a minute. Let me just.
Nothing against. Listen, you and I have spoken. We know each other. We've spoken many times, but the fact of the matter is that I can't tell you how many times 6 months into a relationship, people come to me like, Mark, I thought you were so mean. I thought you were so, and I'm like, who, me? Like me? Oh yeah, you just seem this way. And I'm like, did you ever come and just talk to me? Did you ever come and just say something to me? And I'm tatted up. I'm black, bald head, 6'5", 235 pounds. Like when I tell you I fit the description, I do. But then people meet me and they know me and they're like, he's a big teddy bear. Like he's a goofball. Like he just cares about people. Like listen, if someone's like, hey, like all these people do these pranks where like they run into a room like, hey, this person's trying to do this, come fight. I'm the dude that you don't do that with. Like I apologize. I'm sorry. I'd probably be a snitch. Like I am the worst person to do crime with. Like I'm terrible. but it's just like, but you're absolutely right because what makes this world beautiful is how different we are. What makes it great and beautiful is how inclusive we can be. Like how tell me right now that people don't love taco trucks or Asian bistros or Italian joints. Like Jamaican food, South American food, South American music, African, like the thing about this world that makes it great and beautiful is the fact that we're different and we can be inclusive.
Yeah.
The part that makes it ugly is when we're different and we stay different and we stay away from the different people. But it's just it's a tough thing that we have to really learn to understand and learn, not see from everybody's perspective. Like, I don't need to really agree with what you believe, but I guarantee you 99% of us believe most of the same things.
Yeah.
Like, we're more alike than we are different.
Yeah.
And that can be you from the big city that scares a bunch of Southerners, and then the person from Podunk, Mississippi. It's like, y'all get together. It's like after an hour, it's like, man, there's a lot of stuff we agree on.
Yeah. And it's crazy because I think they said that there are at least, and I believe this is from a psychological lens, that there are at least either between 4 to 6 worldviews that everyone fits into to some extent.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, there are 8 billion people that can fit into 4 to 6 different worldviews.
What does that tell you? I mean, that's it right there. That is it right there. And we're getting mad over one tax bill that went into law in 1991. Like, it's like, come on, people. Like, let's do better.
Yeah. Man. Well, all right. So we're gonna go to the next thing, and let me just go right here. So this one is from the University of Bath in the UK. It says, when a stressful situation is perceived as a threat, health and well-being suffer. People experience more health and well-being issues when they feel overwhelmed by stressful situations rather than seeing them as a challenge, studies find. People who tend to view stressful situations as a threat are more likely to experience health and well-being problems, both mental and physical, than those who see them as a challenge, according to new research from the University of Bath. And the last thing, the research recently published in the journal Stress and Health explores stress appraisals, health and well-being of 395 sports performers. Through an online survey, the researchers believe the results of the study apply equally to non-athletes. And I'm hearing an interesting divide here of, like those people who see things as a challenge and then see situations in life as a threat to their existence overall, right? Because it's like, when things come, I know that when there's certain things that I feel like they're beyond me, I know that I sometimes fit into that first category of people where I feel like, this is a serious situation. This is a threat. And I go into like a mood, right? I go into a mindset, a way of thinking that is not helpful at all. And I know it's not helpful, but I've gotten so accustomed to training my mind to just, to get into that mindset whenever a situation like that arises, and then stare there until I find a solution. And it's a struggle. It's an uphill struggle to be able to see situations and initially process them as a challenge or something that needs to be dealt with, rather than just sitting in whatever it is you're feeling, whether that you're seeing the situation as a threat. There's something that is a threat to your livelihood, to who you are. I don't know what you thought about it when you read this as well.
There's one word that I had to learn about, actually fairly recently, in the last year or so, and I think more people need to understand like what cortisol is and how it affects your body and what brings it on, and back in the day, when I say back in the day, back in the ages when it was just hunting and gathering, and we had our fight or flight response to keep us alive, basically. Again, self-preservation, bringing it all together. And we'd hear a sound at night. We'd prepare ourselves to fight. we would fight and be done with it, or we would run away and stay alive. But then we'd come back down and live our life like we weren't in a constant state. Now, if I could pause for a second and ask people who are ever listening, think about this situation for a second. Your boss emails you at 4:30 on Friday and says, "Hey, I just want to have a quick meeting with you on Monday morning. Have a good weekend." Who of us is going to be like, "Okay, cool. I'll yeah, that's cool." Or how many of us are stressed out the entire weekend? I'm getting fired. I'm messed up. What could this be about? And that's exactly what I read from this. Like it could be the smallest things. And what has happened over that weekend now is that our stress level is up. Our cortisol level is going up. We haven't regulated. We haven't done anything. We thought about all weekend. And just so people know, I mean, we're talking about adrenaline's being pumped into your body to help you stay more focused, to help you, get more blood flowing to your quick twitch muscles so you can get away from things. And we're talking about a desk job. Like we're talking about a desk job. Now that your body, your glands are filling your body with cortisol. And what happens is when we don't regulate it, like it can lead to so many things. We're talking about weight gain. We're talking about blood pressure. We're talking about problems with sleep. We're talking about fatigue for some people. We're talking about diabetes, osteoporosis. We're talking about all these things that can come out of stress and unneeded, unnecessary stress. Because I want people to understand, like this, of all the ones we talked about, this is the one where I think a lot of people need to pay attention, because if you're constantly looking at things as a threat, if you're overstressing, if you're overstimulating, if your adrenal glands are always going and pumping cortisol and pumping adrenaline into your body, like you're staying in that heightened stage. You're staying there. And this is not me just going off on a tangent about what I think and what I believe and all that stuff. This is science. This is physical health. This is mental health. These are things that I have had to learn because I was that person. I was that person that stayed physically and mentally anxious and ready to go. And, oh my God, I'm going to lose my job tomorrow. I did a terrible job. And people used to ask me all the time, like, listen, I'll be honest, I'm not going to toot my own horn, but I'm really good at the jobs that I've had in the past. I'm really good at them because I put the time in. I put a lot of pressure on myself. But say, for instance, if I had to present something, I usually get a really good feedback from it where people are like, "Mark, great job. How did you do all that?" Like, people don't see how anxious I was the weeks before. People don't see how much pressure I put on myself. For a 10-minute presentation, I was probably anxious for a month. I was probably overdoing it for a month. I didn't eat. I didn't sleep. I changed the font. I made it look bigger here. I went and got all the research because I know this person is going to ask me where I got this number from and with this number. Like I had every question answered for a 10-minute discussion that there were no questions to. And I know someone's listening to this and like, "Oh my God, I know that feeling." But here's the thing. We're slowly killing ourselves. We are slowly killing ourselves. Yes, we're living longer, but what happens if we're going to be bedridden for the last 15 years of our life, or we're going to be on 4 or 5 blood thinners or blood pressure pills or cholesterol pills or sleeping pills, or because we stressed out about a 10-minute presentation when we were 35 years old and we did it again at 36, 37. I go back to your question that you asked. What is important? The fact of the matter is this, I tell people this all the time. Think about everything that has gone wrong in your life. Think about every trial, tribulation, opportunity, bump in the road, everything you have gone through, death in the family, sickness in the family, eviction, fire, everything that you've gone through in your life. Somehow you're still here today. somehow you're still here. And that kind of puts it in perspective. It's like, oh, if I know if I'm tough enough to get through those things, you're tough enough to get through whatever life has in store for you. You know, what's important is the present. Enjoy it. Like, I know I can't just tell people to stop being stressful or stop taking things as a threat, because they're still going to do it. But there's ways you can work on it. And one of the things you can do is stop caring so much about everything and everyone. Oh, that part, do you see what that person did to me? And I don't like how they treated me. I don't like what they said to me. Cool. They said it, not you. They did it, not you. Last time I checked, you're still in the same spot whether they said it or not. Like, just live. Just live. But this is one of those things that it takes, like, Stefan, I'll be honest, it takes time. Like, it takes, if you're this person who feels threatened at chances of opportunity or chances of just any kind of dysfunction, like, I'm a big proponent of therapy. This might be one of those things where it's like, let me get some professional help to work on some coping mechanisms.
You could have said it any better or with any better timing, because I want to let you all know, and this is a perfect time to say, that if you're struggling and you want to consider therapy, our sponsor, BetterHelp, is there to help you. You can click betterhelp.com. I choose health down in the description for a 10% discount on your first month of therapy with a licensed professional specific to your needs. And again, with BetterHelp, you can choose who you want to work with. If you're not happy with the person you're working with initially, you can obviously change that individual. And with that 10% discount, what would normally come out to be a $65 per session or per week session would come out to around $58. So there's still at least discounts. If there's some worry around the price of, getting counseling, you can definitely look into BetterHelp. Again, that's betterhelp.com/I choose health, and that is a 10% discount. So, guys, I really enjoyed, like, the things that we went over today, the topics that we went over, and even the individuals that were involved in each of those stories. I hope and wish the best for them. And again, like, if you are struggling, if you need help, look to the communities around you, look to the people who are in your immediate sphere, and even if that's not there, again, seeking out professional help. But it's finding a place where you can really manage and deal with in a healthy way all the things that are coming your way, because there's so many things, probably more than any other age, that we have to juggle this and juggle that, right? And I was even curious, even starting this podcast, if with everything, do I have the time and the mental capacity to deal with, having a child, working certain jobs, and, trying to edit this podcast. Like, usually editing wouldn't take me a long time, but this podcast takes me sometimes close to a week. I can't do that with this episode because this has to go a little bit quicker. But yeah, it's like with everything, we have to find a healthy space, a healthy place to really deal with everything that we have to process. And, I love what Mark said, that, to this point, like, we've been through a lot. And if you've been strong enough to make it to this point, then you're definitely probably strong enough to deal with whatever else is going to come next. So, guys, that is it for another great episode here. I just want to thank Mark again for being so flexible and coming out and sitting down with us. And again, I want to make the appeal to you all to make the choice to be healthy, make the choice to be you. This is the I Choose Health podcast. I'm your host, Stephen Leslie, and I hope you guys have a great and healthy one.